Watch right now on the Front News Project. Moscow surrounded by Ukrainian missiles. Flamingos and Neptunes are ready to turn off the lights in the Russian capital. North Koreans are once again at Ukraine's borders. Kim Jong-un's rations will be smashed. And now, laser weapons are already in the hands of the Ukrainian armed forces. This laser strike is like a sickle to the ambitions of the nasty duckling. Fiery, hot, and blazing. Watch frontline footage right now. Greetings, this is Volodymyr Rapchin with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic. Blackouts in Russia are becoming more and more frequent. Bryansk is joining the already powerless Belgorod. Local residents can boldly thank Putin personally for their troubles. How are things going for them, and which Russians will soon pay a heavy price for their leadership's aggression against Ukrainians? All this in our report.
Russian border cities are plunging into darkness en masse, and after them, the whole of Russia. Plug in.
By Nairobi. Let's go under the flashlight.
Belgorod region was one of the first to experience blackouts. Belgorod now lives in a state of constant power outages. New strikes are only making the difficult situation worse. The night of February 16th was no exception. Drones struck the local thermal power plant, once again plunging the region into a blackout.
Look, basically this is all oak. There's absolutely no light. Everything that's making noise is from the generator. If you see something lit up in a window, that's from a generator. Belgorod, that's Belgorod over there. There's absolutely no power at all over there.
The lack of electricity isn't the only problem for Belgorod residents. Now even having water for heating is a luxury. Just a week ago, a mass evacuation was announced in Belgorod. The city was on the verge of losing its heating. On top of that, the governor of Belgorod region, Gladkov, has already issued a warning. No hot water until April. We
understand that those houses in the city of Belgorod that are connected to centralized heating won't be able to receive it until the end of the heating season. Hot water.
But here, Gladkov wasn't entirely truthful with Belgorod residents about the water. In fact, it's outside.
Stronger and stronger. It even washes this away, lifts it up. Stronger and stronger. Soon the dog will have to be taken away, it'll get flooded.
Night on February 16th, Bryansk took over the baton from Belgorod. Local authorities stated that they shot down more than 170 drones over the Bryansk region. It seems that the energy facilities themselves were personally involved in shooting them down. After flickering a bit, the city lost power and with it, heating. Public channels reported that the strike hit the Novobryanskaya substation in Igonichi. That's less than 20 kilometers from Bryansk. Russians have Putin to thank for all this commotion. And it's not even about Ukrainian revenge, but simply thanking him for starting the war.
Let me clarify things right away. There is no revenge involved. This is targeted combat work, systematic work by the Ukrainian defense forces, so that the Russian military-industrial complex, first and foremost, could not fully work for the war effort, could not fully produce those instruments of death that are then used to destroy our cities, our villages, and most importantly, to kill our citizens. Indeed, Bryansk region has now joined Belgorod as well, again in order to reduce the capabilities of the Russian military-industrial complex, to increase the burden on the rear services and logistics of the Russian occupiers, which in turn support the front line, on the line of combat engagement.
In addition, with strikes on the energy sector, the defense forces have presented the Russian command with a dilemma. There is less and less Russian air defense, which means Russia will have to choose whom to protect. What is more important, Bryansk, Belgorod, or the front? Moreover, the Ukrainians are not striking the enemy's energy sector chaotically. There is a strategy behind all of this.
If we are talking about energy infrastructure, for example, the targets of attacks include, for instance, auto transformers, the restoration of which, for example, takes from 6 to 12 months. What does this achieve in turn? This creates the conditions for an energy cascade when electricity, even if it can be generated, cannot be delivered, for example, to other regions of the Russian Federation, including, for instance, the Moscow region. This, in turn, again, increases the load on the corresponding Russian services.
This is not just a theory. Everything has already been successfully tested, by the way.
The defense forces have already tested this strategy, for example, in the southern part of the Russian Federation when strikes were carried out, for instance, in the Rostov region, as well as in the Krasnodar and Stavropol territories. And then, let's say, a cascade occurred. A cascade of this kind of energy infrastructure collapse. This was felt, for example, in Volgograd and also in other regions of the Russian Federation when everything simply shuts down.
What does it mean that those near Moscow should prepare for a blackout? Moscow also shouldn't let its guard down.
We see that creating, let's say, a blackout in Moscow today is quite difficult, considering once again the density of Moscow's air defense systems. It can be done a little differently. Accordingly, a cascade, Belgorod, Bryansk, Moscow region. The Moscow region, this is already about Moscow itself. That's why we see an increase in such strikes on the Moscow region as well. Strikes on thermal power plants, strikes on transformers, which are quite difficult to repair.
On top of that, freezing temperatures are moving toward the capital of the terrorist country. And in Moscow, even without strikes and blackouts, the streets and bridges have turned into obstacle courses.
Ukrainian drones have been keeping the Russian capital on edge for several days now. Even if it's hard to break through, it still has a psychological effect. Moreover, we shouldn't forget about the closure of airports during such attacks. Each such shutdown is a loss for the treasury of the terrorist country, which means less money for the Russian military-industrial complex, which produces the missiles and drones that kill Ukrainians.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the much-suffering Pokrovsk front line. There, the fighting is extremely fierce. On the Pokrovsk front, the enemy carried out 58 attacks. The occupiers tried to advance in the areas of populated settlements: Toretskoye, Kucheryov Yar, Beletskoye, Zatishye, Rodinskoye, Shevchenko, Novoalexandrovka, Pokrovsk, Udakhnoye, Kotlino, Molodetskoye, Novopodgorodnoye, Novopavlovka, Novonikolevka, Filia, and Dakhnoye. 3 attempts are still ongoing. And now attention, how have thousands of soldiers from North Korea gathered near Ukraine's borders? What goal is the Kremlin pursuing with this move? And what role is assigned to this meat ration from Kim Jong-un? Let's look into this issue together and draw the appropriate conclusions.
In his attempts to appease the Russian dictator, Kim Jong-un has lost his best soldiers.
I saw my comrades die right next to me. I hid in a dugout.
In October 2024, North Korean troops joined the main killers of the 21st century. At first, it was about sending engineering brigades, but the Russian army suffered such heavy losses in the Kursk region that it became impossible to quickly make up for them with their own forces. The Ukrainian forces' August raid directly into Russian territory forced the command to change their plans. Instead of engineers, what was needed were capable infantry units.
Russian troops are critically short of personnel to cover all sections of the front. And as soon as a critical situation arises somewhere, it immediately leads, if not to a failure, then at least to a weakening of defensive capabilities.
The operation is developing successfully, strictly in accordance with pre-approved plans.
During this time, more than 18,000 soldiers have taken part in the war against Ukraine. According to South Korean intelligence, about 6,000 have been killed and only 1,100 have returned home. Another approximately 11,000 servicemen are holed up on Russian territory in the Kursk region adjacent to Sumy.
North Korean soldiers are learning modern combat tactics, these include technologies used in modern warfare such as unmanned systems and communication systems. Others include unmanned systems, including those with artificial intelligence, as well as combat tactics that differ somewhat from previous wars, namely the use of small assault groups.
At first glance, it may seem that the North Koreans are simply lying in ambush, but their presence in the Kursk region is of strategic importance.
If tomorrow the KPA units are withdrawn from the Kursk region, the entire group will be severely weakened. And they will not only be unable to conduct offensive operations in the Sumy region, but will also struggle to defend even the territories they have already captured.
This is a kind of buffer that allows Russian troops to hold the front line and carry out limited offensive operations.
The actions carried out by North Korean soldiers behind the front line have allowed Putin to free up, well, roughly the same number, about 10,000 Russian soldiers, and transfer them from the rear, well, the relatively close rear, from the second or third line, so to speak, to the front line to take part in combat operations. In this way, as if to numerically reinforce their troops directly on the front line.
For now, the North Korean contingent is operating within the framework of the agreement between Pyongyang and Moscow. The soldiers are not leaving Russian territory.
In all likelihood, at this particular moment in time, they will not physically cross the border into Ukraine, but will instead provide strategic assistance to the Russian army, while remaining on the territory of the Russian Federation.
The official reasons are supposedly compliance with international restrictions and North Korea's reluctance to escalate the situation with sanctions. Unofficially, the cost and conditions set by Kim Jong-un make the use of North Koreans in Ukraine economically and politically unfeasible for the Kremlin.
If North Korean military forces cross the border into our sovereign territory, then Kim Jong-un himself would effectively become a legitimate military target, in accordance with established international legal documents.
And don't even try to look for good intentions. It's all banal and simple. For Kim Jong-un, sending thousands of soldiers to certain death is just a way to score points and make money. And for Moscow, the North Koreans are just a temporary quick fix masking the systemic problems of the army.
The North Koreans have started more or less active construction. They built several blocks, somewhere out there in some of the more depressed areas.
For example, in the new Hwasan district, the Sefioli Street was opened. The North Korean dictator cynically declared that it was supposedly in honor of soldiers killed by the Ukrainian defense forces. According to him, the facility should become a source of honor for the generation, not a point of pride for Pyongyang and the state. Thus, the North Koreans on Kursk soil are a symbol that Russia cannot wage war on its own. And for Ukraine, this is yet another proof that the enemy is weak.
And now we move to the Konstantinivka direction of the front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. In the Konstantinivka direction, the occupiers stormed our defenders' positions 26 times today, near Konstantinovka, Pleshchayevka, Sherbinovka, Ivanopole, Ilyinovka, Rusin Yar, Nikolaipolye, Novopavlovka, Stepanovka, and Sofievka. At present, there are no active clashes. Could it be that the end is coming for Russian Shaheds? Ukraine is improving its air defense and is actively working on creating an anti-drone shield. However, in the fight against drones, it's not just about weaponry, but also about how the air defense units are organized. What will change in Ukraine's air defense and its operations, and when will Ukraine neutralize the threat of enemy UAVs? More on this in the report.
On February 10th, the internet was abuzz with news. Ukraine will have its own Iron Dome. The publication Atlantic reports that Ukraine has created laser weapons against drones. The Sunray system is a prototype of a laser weapon capable of silently shooting down drones at a distance.
The Sunray system visually resembles an amateur telescope with cameras and can be mounted on the roof of a regular pickup truck. The weapon operates silently and emits no visible light. During the demonstration, the laser set the drone on fire in a matter of seconds, after which it fell to the ground.
The system is undoubtedly promising, but while work on the laser development is still ongoing, Ukrainian air defense is squeezing the most out of the weaponry currently available.
Even now, our Air Force reports that in the event of a mass raid, more than 90% of all types of Russian drones are being destroyed. Shaheds, Gerans, metal mazes, all sorts of other junk, and Molnias.
One of the weapons ensuring such a high level of effectiveness is the Interceptor drone. They are also known as anti-aircraft drones. In just 1 month, the interceptors from the Alpha unit destroyed more than 300 Russian Molnia UAVs, and their use is being scaled up to the maximum extent possible. Analysts say the goal is to bring the number of intercepted UAV-type targets up to 80 to 90% of all destroyed targets. And that's because interceptor drones are a very effective weapon, not only in terms of shooting down targets, but also in terms of the cost per down target. But there is another solution in the fight against UAVs, the anti-drone dome. Its main goal, according to Ukraine's Minister of Defense, is to eliminate the threat while it's still approaching. And for that, Ukraine needs to improve its system for detecting aerial targets, which is exactly what we're working on.
During the course of last summer, our national armed forces purchased a fairly large number, totaling many hundreds, of advanced sensors. meaning specialized monitoring stations that are either mounted securely on mobile trailers or permanently installed, and which combine a high-resolution radar, a sophisticated optoelectronic system, and a high-precision infrared thermal imaging system. For example, such stations are capable of detecting a radar and instantly transmitting the data to the nearest mobile group so that they can effectively use weapons against it.
And this process is ongoing. That's why new models are appearing in Ukraine's arsenal. For example, the Lanza LTR-25 radar complex, which Spain is supplying to Ukraine. This system is capable of detecting targets at long distances, and it can track low observable objects such as Shaheds and missiles at low altitudes. But let's get back to the anti-drone dome. According to experts, it neutralizes the drone threat, and Russia will soon abandon this tactic, the drone swarm.
I think that once the anti-drone dome is fully operational, regardless of weather conditions, the shoot-down rate will really be too high for it to be profitable for the Russians to continue this practice. Of course, they won't abandon it right away, but that's because they're not ramping up drone production. It's clear they're in a crisis situation. They don't understand whether it's worth continuing with this technology. They've realized it's not worth expanding it because it's already too costly. If out of 100 launched drones, 95 are shot down, 93 or 92 are shot down.
However, to improve air defense, it's necessary not only to strengthen it with more weaponry, but also to change the way it operates. And this is well understood in Ukraine. That's why President Zelensky has already announced a restructuring of how air defense teams operate. In
certain regions, the way teams operate is being almost completely overhauled. Interceptors, mobile fire groups, the entire component of short-range air defense.
Exactly what this entails has not yet been disclosed. But one possible aspect is the active involvement of units from the Ukrainian ground forces in air defense operations. And there are already examples of this happening. On the night of February 3rd, during a massive Russian attack, air defense units of the 3rd Army Corps shot down 33 Russian UAVs that were flying to attack peaceful Ukrainian cities.
Operation is a layered defense system deployed by the Corps, brigades, and units to cover our troops on the front line. At the same time, the fighters of the Troika are holding the country's first line of air defense and destroying drones that Russia sends to strike all across Ukraine.
Today, the air defense of the ground forces is the first echelon of protection for Ukraine's skies. This echelon includes short-range anti-aircraft missile systems, mobile fire teams, interceptor crews, and anti-aircraft artillery.
The main feature, essentially, is that we simply have a small caliber of strike weapons. Accordingly, the engagement zone is small, and there are limits to the targets we can engage. But this also gives us certain advantages. Our crews, our units, are agile and mobile. They use tactical-level radars. That's why we try to destroy as many enemy aerial targets as possible that enter our area of responsibility.
If this process is scaled up and coordination between different branches of the military is established, Ukrainian air defense will become many times more effective.
Everything will be unified. The destruction of drones will begin right from the line of contact. And there will be cooperation between all branches of the armed forces. Between the ground forces, aviation, air defense, local defense, and the territorial defense forces. In other words, all of this will be within a single framework. The most important thing is to create an inter-branch automated system that will quickly and reliably handle target allocation almost in real time.
According to the Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, the process has already begun. The redistribution of functions is starting.
There are plans to redistribute functions between the air defense missile forces and a new branch of the military, which will be responsible for protecting important sites.
All of this means that Ukraine is building not just a defense, but a multi-layered system that is making our skies increasingly inaccessible to the enemy.
So, now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Alexandrovsk front. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. On the Alexandrovsk direction, the occupiers tried to improve their position towards Zeleny High. Ivanivka, Alexandrovgrad, Yegorovka, Vishneve, Alexeyevka, Verbove, Stepnove, Danilovka, Novoye Zaporozhye, Zlagoda, and Rybny. The areas of Novokranka and Velikomikhailovka were subjected to airstrikes. And here's another thing. Laser air defense systems are already at the disposal of the Ukrainian armed forces and are already successfully shooting down enemy drones. Right now, we'll tell you about and show you this development by Ukrainian weapons engineers.
Laser weapons are now in Ukraine. What seemed hard to believe just a few years ago has now become a reality.
It will first be used in the rear and then directly deployed to the line of engagement.
The Atlantic reports that Ukrainian engineers have made a breakthrough in the development of laser weapons, citing American journalist Simon Schuster. He personally visited Ukraine and saw both the development itself and how it works.
The laser rotated while its cameras tracked the target. The operator shouted, "Fire!" Within seconds, the drone caught fire as if struck by an invisible lightning bolt, then fell to the ground in a fiery arc.
At the same time, Schuster reported that the military calls the development Sunray, which means sunbeam. Its size allows the system to be placed in the trunk of a regular pickup truck, and during operation the installation is silent and emits no light. This allows it to operate covertly from any location.
Most likely these systems will first be used to intercept those same drones. Perhaps in the future we can talk about using them against missiles. It's also possible to consider using them against UAVs, but that will take time.
I should note that earlier there was already talk in Ukraine about developing its own laser weapon. At that time, the information was made public by the commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Unmanned Systems, Vadim Sukharevsky. It was said that the laser is capable of destroying enemy targets at an altitude of about 2 kilometers.
The Ukrainian combat laser can shoot down aerodynamic targets at altitudes above 2 kilometers. These are impressive tactical and technical specifications. The thing is, its American counterpart has an effective range of about 1.6 kilometers. Accordingly, when the Ukrainian side announces these tactical and technical characteristics, specifically a target engagement range of 2 kilometers, we can say that this is a significant breakthrough for the Ukrainian defense industry in developing innovative strike systems.
Analysts note that, as a rule, a laser installation is usually accompanied by other systems. The system includes a powerful energy source, which is why it is often mounted on large vehicles. This is the case when we're talking about a mobile installation. Now, considering that the Ukrainian laser operates from a car trunk, it is likely that our engineers have also achieved a breakthrough in terms of the system's size.
It is certainly not a matter of mere coincidence that they typically choose to install these on ships or other massive high-capacity platforms that can consistently generate and provide significant electricity generation. Even the Striker has a power station that allows it to deliver those 50 kilowatts in pulses. And
now about the power. The stated specifications for the well-known American and British laser weapons today are around 50 kilowatts. This ensures the guaranteed destruction of aerial targets at altitudes up to 2 kilometers. Ukraine, however, appears to have managed to surpass these specifications.
Apparently, the laser's power is over 50 kilowatts. Because, let me emphasize again, the declared effective range of the American laser is about 1.6 kilometers. Its power is around 50 kilowatts. In addition, it should be noted that a similar combat laser has also been developed by the British side. The British combat laser has a similar range, up to 2 kilometers. However, its power is already 55 kilowatts.
So where should we expect the first official use of the Ukrainian Sunray? According to analysts, this is an extremely successful solution for protecting our rear facilities. First of all, there is no Interceptor missile, which creates additional risks from falling shrapnel. There are no gunshot sounds that frighten civilians. And most importantly, the targets of the Russians are often energy facilities. So by installing the laser nearby, we get both a power source for the beam and protection for critical infrastructure.
It will certainly happen in the near future. To begin with, the first
be used in the rear, and then it will be directly deployed to the line of engagement. when we are able to operate the way most tactical aviation aircraft do. When the laser in real-time mode must track targets and immediately lock on in order to direct that beam of energy there.
According to Western journalists, the Ukrainian laser weapon program lasted about 2 years and cost several $million. However, the installation itself is now estimated at several $100,000 and can be used multiple times, which is significantly cheaper than purchasing or producing missiles for existing air defense systems.
Now we move to the Orikhiv direction of the front. Putin's army is up to its usual tricks here as well. In the Orikhiv direction, the enemy attacked 13 times towards Stepnohirsk, Pavlivka, Lukyanivske, and Shcherbaki. They carried out airstrikes in the areas of Hryhorivka, Zarekhne, and Yulivka. And you'll laugh, but the Russian spring offensive is failing before it's even begun. It's easy to believe something like that. This so-called second-best army in the world is definitely capable of it. The reason is the Starlink shutdowns, but that's not all. So what went wrong for Putin's thugs? We'll tell you and show you right now.
At the moment, we are in urgent need of the Starlink system. Help us.
Elon Musk is disrupting the Russian offensive. Putin's spring military campaign is now in serious doubt.
Thanks to Elon Musk for modern technology. It works great, very tasty.
So the director of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation, Dmytro Zhmailo, explained, immediately after the Starlink terminals were blocked, the Russian army quickly switched to Telegram to maintain at least some communication on the front line. But the very next day, the messenger was declared hostile, and then it stopped working too.
Why aren't you laughing? Isn't it funny? You didn't get it, did you? This is Russia in...
As a result, today's Russian offensive and a more strategic objective, for spring 2026, it's on the verge of collapse. And the panic is not being hidden, neither in the Kremlin nor even on the pro-government Z platforms, where they openly talk about what it really means for the occupiers to be left without communication.
For example, here's how a tank operates on the front line right now. There's a small Starlink installed on the tank. I know it costs 35,000 rubles. At the moment, it's installed on every tank. Through this Starlink, the guys working from the tank get online. On a tablet or phone, they get a live feed from a Mavic drone that's flying high above. And so, they fire from the tank and can see in real time where their shells are landing. Adjustments, elevation, side. At the same time, using voice communication over the internet, they stay in contact with the commander. And the commander gives them instructions on where to fire. At this house, the next house, that trench over there, and so on. If all of this collapses, we basically roll back to the previous century.
But the rollback is already happening. This is how our military notes that the Russians have reverted to the tactics of 2022 to 2023, back when Musk's high technologies were still unknown to them.
They were pretty banal and conservative in their approach. They laid internet cables, set up reinforced Wi-Fi transmitters that operated directly at headquarters of various levels, and so on. But first and foremost, they focused on this kind of setup when it came to internet-based communications.
At the same time, it's worth noting that cables can be cut and all transmitters and antennas have to be installed on tall structures. And unlike Starlinks, you absolutely can't cover them with anything. As a result, our drones just got some more interesting work to do.
Here we see an attack by a Ukrainian FPV drone on special equipment that the Russians installed on a power line tower. While the Ukrainian armed forces have full internet access through Starlink, the Russians don't even have this so-called alternative right now. And as soon as they tried to set up this alternative, it immediately started getting hit as well.
However, while the Russians are using Starlinks as cup holders, their command still hopes that this foreign equipment will start working again. For example, in Russia, they're looking for Ukrainians who will officially register satellite dishes for money and give them a second life. Ukrainian hackers immediately responded to this.
They created numerous fake platforms, including those very Telegram bots that offered to do exactly this. A drop service for adding these very terminals to the whitelist. That's how they tracked them down. As a result, first of all, they found out the numbers of the Starlinks that the Russian military wanted to sneak onto the whitelist in this way. Secondly, they received almost $6,000 from the Russian military. They got scammed. They were just blatantly deceived.
And now the deceived Russians are once again claiming that they've outsmarted the treacherous West. That's how, with great pomp, an alternative was presented. The stratospheric platform Barrage 1. Naturally, domestic-made.
We don't even produce nails ourselves in a country that manufactures so much metal.
In short, a Wi-Fi transmitter with an amplifier is lifted into the sky on a balloon, which in theory can provide internet to the areas it drifts over for up to 2 days. This is
so that there's good communication, so you can always stay connected. Nowadays, in the age of technology, all information, maps and everything else, without the internet you can't do anything.
In reality, as reported by Le Monde, due to the loss of Starlink, Russia has significantly lost its potential on the battlefield. The accuracy of long-range strikes is steadily declining. Sometimes the occupiers don't even know that their defensive line has been breached, and casualties during assaults increase with every new attempt to advance on the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces.
Right now, Russian soldiers are being sent into assaults. In actual fact, they currently have no reliable way to receive any real-time intelligence, and they have no effective way to launch sophisticated drones and operate them in real time. To adjust the actions of Russian soldiers by telling them where Ukrainian troops are located, how best to bypass them, how to avoid running into obstacles, and so on. Right now, none of that exists.
It's noteworthy that back in 2023, the chief of the Russian armed forces, Gerasimov, promised to present their own satellite communication system in the shortest possible time. 3 years later, it becomes clear that they should have listened to Matvienko and at least started with making their own nails.
That's all for today. But very soon, Front News will bring you new, unique materials from our journalists, from the hottest spots of the war gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Rabchin with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.